The 45th edition of the NFL Draft kicked off on April 29th in front of TV cameras for the first time this year. Major League Baseball games are being played, for now, with the players setting a deadline for a strike. The NBA and NHL playoffs are highlighted, a recap of the Masters, and much more in the April and May 1980 edition of Back in Time Sports. NFL general managers and personnel directors gathered in the New York Sheraton Hotel on Tuesday, April 29th and Wednesday, April 30th for the annual Players Selection Meeting, and for the first time a television broadcast crew was on hand to document the event. The cable station ESPN, which first went on air last September, sent former NFL general managers Joe Thomas and Upton Bell, along with Howard Balzer of the Sporting News, to provide analysis of each pick. The general consensus among scouts around the league is that this year's draft was not very deep, and after the first two rounds, the talent dropped off considerably. Both offensive and defensive linemen were expected to be in high demand. The teams had a 15-minute time limit for each selection in the first two rounds, and 5 minutes for each of the final 10 rounds. The Detroit Lions were the first team on the clock at 10 a.m., and to no one's surprise, chose Oklahoma running back Billy Sims. The question now is if the Lions can sign Sims. Last year's number one pick, Tom Cousineau, ended up signing with Montreal in the Canadian League. Coach Bill Walsh of the 49ers had indicated before the draft they were willing to trade down from the second pick, and the New York Jets decided to trade the 13th and 20th overall picks to move up and select wide receiver Johnny Lamb Jones. Jones won a gold medal at the age of 18 as part of the world record-setting 4x100 meter relay team in the 1976 Olympic Games. Despite injury concerns, the Cincinnati Bengals selected offensive tackle Anthony Munoz with the third pick. Washington had a first-round pick for the first time in 12 years and selected receiver Art Monk of Syracuse with the 18th overall pick. Heisman Trophy winner Charles White was selected by the Cleveland Browns with the 27th pick in the first round. A lot of teams were concerned about his size at 5'9" and 182 pounds. With the last pick in the first round, the Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers took Arizona State quarterback Mark Malone, as 31-year-old Terry Bradshaw has said he'll retire in 2 years. Terry's brother, Utah State quarterback Craig Bradshaw, was selected by the Houston Oilers in the 7th round. 4 kickers were drafted, with Eddie Murray being the highest pick by the Detroit Lions in the 7th round. The Nebraska Cornhuskers were the team that had the most players drafted with 10, and the conference having the most players drafted was the Pac-10 with 40. The NBA playoffs kicked off in early April with 4 best-of-3 series. The home team won 10 of 11 games in the opening round, with the lone exception being the Philadelphia 76ers, eliminating the Bullets in Washington. All 4 higher seeds advanced to the best-of-7 second round. The Boston Celtics were matched up with the Houston Rockets in the second round after beating the Rockets in all 6 regular season games the teams played. It was no different in the playoffs, with Boston sweeping the series 4-0. None of the games were close, with Boston winning every game by at least 17 points. The Philadelphia 76ers and the Los Angeles Lakers both cruised to 4-1 series wins. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the leading scorer for the Lakers in all 5 games of their series. The Seattle Supersonics and Milwaukee Bucks series was much closer and went to 7 games, with Seattle coming out on top. The first 2 games went into overtime, and only 1 game of the series was decided by more than 5 points. Game 5 of the series was played in the Seattle Kingdome with an attendance of 40,172, which was the largest crowd ever to attend a professional basketball game. The previous record was also set in the Kingdome in 1978. The semifinal round saw 2 decisive victories. In the East, Philadelphia defeated Boston 4-1, holding the Celtics to under 100 points in all 5 games. Despite being eliminated, the Celtics had the best one-year turnaround in the NBA, going from a regular season record of 29-53 last year to 61-21 this year. In the West, the Lakers eliminated last year's champs, the Seattle Supersonics, also with a margin of 4-1. Games 3 and 4 were played at the University of Washington gym, as the Kingdome and Seattle Center were both unavailable. In Game 4, the Sonics were up 57-39 at halftime, but eventually lost 98-93. The Los Angeles Lakers and Philadelphia 76ers met in the NBA Finals for a best-of-7 series, with Los Angeles holding the home court advantage. The Lakers were no strangers to the NBA Finals, making their 16th appearance in the NBA's 34th season. They won the title in 6 of those seasons, but only once since the team moved from Minneapolis in 1960. The Sixers made their 6th appearance in the finals, winning 2 championships, with one coming while the franchise was known as the Syracuse Nationals. The first 4 games were split 2-2, with each team winning 1 game on the road. Julius Erving had one of the highlights of the series in Game 4 with an incredible baseline move. Los Angeles won a close Game 5 but suffered a blow when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was averaging over 30 points in the series, injured his ankle and was unavailable for Game 6 in Philadelphia. Magic Johnson started at center for the Lakers in Game 6 and scored 42 points with 15 rebounds to lead the Lakers to a win in their 7th championship. Johnson was the first rookie to be named NBA Finals MVP. In the first finals with the three-point shot available, Julius Erving made the only one in the series, with the teams a combined 0 for 19 in all other attempts. It was the first professional championship for Los Angeles since the Lakers last won the title in 1972. Since then, the Dodgers lost 4 World Series, the Rams lost a Super Bowl, and the Lakers had also lost in an NBA Finals. Magic Johnson wasn't the only rookie on Los Angeles. First-year head coach Paul Westhead became the interim coach last November when Jack McKinney suffered head injuries in a bicycle accident. Pat Riley was hired as an assistant coach to replace the position Westhead previously held. Shortly after the finals, Westhead was given a 4-year contract, making him one of the highest-paid coaches in the NBA. In other NBA news, the league set a regular season attendance record with 9,937,575 fans attending games this year. The attendance was an increase of more than 175,000 over last season. The scoring title this year went to George Gervin of the San Antonio Spurs for the 3rd consecutive year. Gervin scored 33.1 points per game. However, some basketball coaches use scoring efficiency to rate players. In the college ranks, Coach Eddie Sutton of Arkansas uses a system that divides a player's total points by field goal attempts to get an efficiency rating. Using that system, the Celtics' Cedric Maxwell comes out on top with a 1.80 rating, followed by Artis Gilmore at 1.67. Also in the top 10 are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson of the Lakers. Gervin's efficiency rating comes in at 1.33 and runner-up scoring leader World B. Free at 1.32. The All-NBA rookie team was announced with Magic Johnson, Bill Cartwright, and Larry Bird all unanimous selections. The team was voted on by the league's 22 head coaches. Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, and Jerry Lucas were inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame. The three all played together on the 1960 Olympic team that won the gold medal in Rome, winning half its games by margins of more than 40 points. The Boston Celtics won a coin flip with Utah Jazz that gives them the number 1 selection of the NBA draft in June. Boston had the best record in the NBA this year, but they had acquired 2 picks from the Detroit Pistons in exchange for Bob McAdoo. Detroit finished with the worst record in the NBA. A lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court to force the NBA to reactivate the Providence Steamrollers. The Steamrollers last played in 1949 with the predecessor to the NBA, the Basketball Association of America, and the franchise was shelved after a 3-49 record. NBA General Counsel David Stern dismissed the argument and said the original franchise was allowed a 1-year grace period to reactivate before the franchise rights expired. The final playoff spots were claimed in the National Hockey League during the last week of play in the regular season. Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers scored a goal and 2 assists as the Oilers rallied from a 2-0 deficit to defeat the Colorado Rockies 6-2 to earn a playoff berth. Gretzky finished the season tied with Marcel Dion for the point lead at 137 each. The Montreal Canadiens, who have won the last 4 Stanley Cups under coach Scotty Bowman, finished with the number 3 seed. Bowman is the coach of the Buffalo Sabres this year and clinched the number 2 seed in the last game of the season, finishing only behind the Philadelphia Flyers, who took the number 1 seed. The first round of the NHL playoffs were best-of-5 series, and all of the higher seeds advanced, with half the teams sweeping their series. The number 1 seed Philadelphia Flyers swept their series, but it was closer than expected with 2 games going to overtime. The number 7 seed Chicago Blackhawks also swept their series, and with the win in Game 1, they snapped a record 16-game losing streak in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The only series that went 5 games was number 4 seed Boston Bruins versus the number 13 seed Pittsburgh Penguins. Pittsburgh was up 2-1 with a chance to win the series at home, but lost Game 4 by a score of 8-3 and also lost in the final game at Boston. 19-year-old rookie Ray Bourque of Boston had 6 points in the final 2 games to push the Bruins into the next round. In the best-of-7 second round, number 1 seed Philadelphia held the New York Rangers to 7 goals in 5 games to win the series 4-1. The number 6 seed Minnesota North Stars won the first 2 and last 2 games of their series to upset the number 3 seed Montreal Canadiens. Despite a close series, most of the games themselves were not close battles, as each of the first 6 games were decided by 3 or more goals. The opposite was true of the New York Islanders, who beat the Boston Bruins 4-1, but 3 of the games went to overtime. The semifinal matchups included the number 1 seed Philadelphia Flyers versus the Minnesota North Stars, and the number 2 seed Buffalo Sabres versus the New York Islanders. In a high-scoring Game 1, Philadelphia was leading 4-3 after the first period, but Minnesota came back to pull off the upset 6-5. Philadelphia took control of the series from that point on, winning the final 4 games. The New York Islanders took a commanding 3-game lead over the Buffalo Sabres in their series and came out on top in 6 games to make their first ever Stanley Cup Finals appearance. The finals were a high-scoring affair, with the overall number 5 seed New York Islanders winning their first Stanley Cup trophy 4-2. 51 total goals were scored in the 6 games, with Brian Trotter of the Islanders named the series MVP. A controversial call in Game 6 helped the Islanders to close out the series, when what appeared to be a clear offside call went without a whistle, as New York took an early 2-1 lead. Defenseman Ken Morrow of the Islanders was on the U.S. Olympic team in February and became the first player to win the Olympic gold medal and Stanley Cup in the same year. Islanders head coach Al Arbour has now won the Stanley Cup with 4 teams. As a player, Arbour was a champion with the Detroit Red Wings, Chicago Blackhawks, and Toronto Maple Leafs. In other NHL news, Atlanta Flames owner Tom Cousins announced a sale of the team for an estimated $16 million. Cousins said that the team lost $2 million last year, with television and radio contracts only bringing $250,000. The team is expected to be moved to Calgary. The Major League Baseball Players Association voted unanimously not to play the last week of spring training as a protest of contract negotiations with the owners, but postponed a regular season strike until May 22nd. The owners responded by withholding expense money from the players at spring training, including meal money, allowances, and hotel costs. The UPI preseason baseball survey ranked each division, with the winners being Baltimore in the AL East, California in the AL West, Montreal in the NL East, and Houston in the NL West. The Yankees, Royals, Pirates, and Dodgers were all a close second in each division. Opening day started on time as the Cincinnati Reds beat the Atlanta Braves 9-0 in the first game of the season. Tom Seaver, who was slated to start for the Reds, had the flu, so 22-year-old Frank Pastore filled in and pitched the first opening day shutout for the Reds since 1943. The Reds are an opening day phenomenon, as they have opened every season at home since 1876 except once. The game was also broadcast nationally on the cable station TBS, to the dismay of many Braves fans. The next day had a full slate of games, with the Houston Astros and Los Angeles Dodgers playing a game on NBC, with Joe Garagiola and Yogi Berra exchanging stories as the Astros won the game 3-2 in the Astrodome. Astros pitcher J.R. Richard had a perfect game through 6 1/3 innings and ended the game with 13 strikeouts. 4 days later, the defending champion Pittsburgh Pirates opened their season at home with Sister Sledge singing the national anthem and, of course, an encore of We Are Family, after which the Pirates beat the Cubs in extra innings to improve their record to 4-1. By the end of April, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati were leading in the National League standings, despite the Cubs and Cardinals each having 3 hitters in the top 10 of the National League batting average leaders. Toronto and Chicago were on top of the AL standings, and rookie Joe Charbonneau was in the top 10 in batting averages. In early March, Charbonneau was stabbed with a penknife in Mexico, but so far the injury hasn't slowed down the Cleveland outfielder and DH, who is batting .354. May 23rd was the date the Major League Baseball Players Association had set to begin a strike if an agreement wasn't concluded with the team owners. A day before the deadline, it looked bleak, with federal mediator Ken Moffitt commenting that the sides seemed a month away from an agreement rather than 24 hours. The primary disagreement was over compensation for a team that loses a player in free agency. In the end, an agreement was reached despite the key issues still unresolved. The deal included appointing 2 owner representatives and 2 for the players to work out a new system. The committee will present its findings and recommendations in January of next year. If no agreement is reached at that point, the owner's proposal will go into effect, with the players retaining the right to strike. With the negotiations settled for this year, the focus returned to the field, with the New York Yankees holding the best record in baseball at 27-16 behind the excellent pitching of Ron Guidry, Tommy John, and Goose Gossage. The Los Angeles Dodgers held the best record in the National League at 27-17, with a good balance of hitting and pitching, especially at home. The Dodgers finished the month with a 19-3 record in Los Angeles. Steve Carlton and Mike Schmidt of the Philadelphia Phillies were named the NL Players of the Month for May. Carlton leads the major leagues in wins and strikeouts, and Schmidt leads both leagues in home runs and RBIs. The American League announced early leaders in All-Star voting, with Rod Carew of the California Angels having the most overall votes. The Boston Red Sox had 3 players in starting positions, with Carlton Fisk at catcher and Fred Lynn and Jim Rice in the outfield. George Brett of the Royals and Reggie Jackson of the Yankees are also among the top vote-getters. This year's All-Star Game will be held at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. Ken Landreau of the Minnesota Twins currently owns a 31-game hitting streak. Only 16 players in Major League history have a longer streak, with Joe DiMaggio's 56-game streak in 1941 the longest. Only one streak is longer in the last 30 years, when Pete Rose got a hit in 44 straight 2 years ago. Aside from being in the record books, Landreau has financial incentive to continue his streak. Last year, Aqua Velva introduced an annual award for the player with the longest hitting streak in the majors. $1,000 will be awarded for each game of the streak, and if Landreau's streak holds up as the longest this year, it will already be worth more than the league minimum salary of $30,000. The third annual McDonald's High School Basketball All-American game took place on April 12th. The high scorers were the game's MVP, Russell Cross of the West team, and teammate Glenn Rivers with 20 points each, and Sam Perkins pulled down 24 rebounds. Last year's game included current college stars John Paxson, Ralph Sampson, Byron Scott, Isaiah Thomas, James Worthy, and Dominique Wilkins. Many of the top high school players signed national letters of intent on or shortly after the April 9th signing day. Glenn Rivers signed with Marquette, and Sam Perkins signed with North Carolina over UCLA, but the Bruins did sign 7'3" junior college center Mark Eaton. North Carolina also signed Matt Doherty, and USC signed Jimmy Brown, son of former NFL great Jim Brown. Several college players, including Mark Aguirre and Ralph Sampson, have decided to return to college rather than declaring for the NBA draft. Boston holds the first pick in the June draft and had shown considerable interest in drafting Sampson. In coaching news, Western Kentucky head coach Gene Keady was hired by Purdue to replace Lee Rose. Despite leading Purdue to the Final Four this year, Rose left to take the coaching job at the University of South Florida. With college basketball television contracts increasing in value and the NCAA's strict rules on recruiting, many coaches are finding what could be considered creative workarounds. One of these methods is the bump-in. When a recruit has used up all his official visits, sometimes coaches will attend a high school player's game and happen to bump into the prospect. More elaborate schemes could include university boosters, sending a recruit and his family a plane ticket to Cancun or Hawaii, and just by chance, a coach will also be traveling through the same airport. On the PGA circuit, the 44th Masters tournament was held at Augusta National in early April. 1977 Masters winner Tom Watson has been ranked number 1 in the world for 3 years and was widely picked as the favorite. Watson also tied for second in 1978 and lost in a playoff to Fuzzy Zoeller last year. 40-year-old Jack Nicklaus with a record of 5 Masters titles and 50-year-old Arnold Palmer with 4 titles were also in the field. At the end of the first round, 23-year-old Seve Ballesteros of Spain was tied for the lead. In the second round, Ballesteros took control and finished with a 4-stroke lead. Ballesteros extended his lead to 7 strokes after the third round. In the final round, he extended his lead further to 10 strokes, and despite running into trouble on the back 9, was able to hang on to win by 4. Ballesteros was the youngest winner of the British Open last year and became the youngest player and also the first European to wear the green jacket this year. The competition for the title in the final round might not have been dramatic, but many fans were pleased to see Nicklaus and Palmer play in the same group on Sunday. Although well out of contention, the two received plenty of attention, owning almost a quarter of all Master titles between them. Although the PGA is attempting to broaden its appeal to television viewers, one novelty that was not allowed at Augusta was the players wearing microphones. At the previous PGA event, where some players were mic'd up, several players were broadcast speaking negatively about another player who they deemed as playing too slow. First up in the random sports section is minor league baseball. The Durham Bulls are playing again for the first time in 9 years, but a dampener was put on their opening game. 20 of the team's uniforms, some gloves, and a total of $4,000 of equipment was stolen from their clubhouse a couple of days before their opener. They were able to borrow some old uniforms from their Major League affiliate, Atlanta Braves, and offered a $500 reward for the return of their equipment. The team is expected to have a good season with Albert Hall, Milt Thompson, Gerald Perry, and Paul Runge in the batting order. Arthur Ashe has announced his retirement from professional tennis this month. His career included 3 individual Grand Slam titles and 2 Grand Slam doubles titles. The 36-year-old former Army lieutenant has already been inducted into the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame and is almost certainly destined for a spot in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Volcanic eruptions at Mount St. Helens is causing trouble for the Seattle Seahawks training camp at Eastern Washington University. The Seahawks general manager, John Thompson, has said another heavy volcanic ash fallout would force the club to move its camp to another location. Finally, the San Diego Chicken won a court case to continue performing in an outfit that was, quote, substantially different than the one he wore while representing KGB Radio. The victorious Chicken is Ted Giannoulis, who has portrayed the famous fowl for 6 years. After the decision, Giannoulis crowed, "I feel like a free bird." That's all for April and May 1980. Looking ahead to the next episode, the NBA draft will be covered, an update on the Major League Baseball season, Wimbledon, college sports news, and much more on the June and July 1980 edition of Back in Time Sports.